All right, welcome to this webinar from the Multifamily Investor Nation. I'm your host on this webinar, Dan Handford. You can see my beautiful picture down there on the screen, and I'm also here on the video, so good to see you on here on the video as well. I'm the founder of the Multifamily Investor Nation, and I'm also one of the managing partners of a group called PassiveInvesting.com. You can see the website here. For those of you who have not been there before and are watching this live, I'll type into the chat box here so you can see that link. It says PassiveInvesting.com. If you want to find out more information about me and our group, you can click on this Meet the Team button right here on your screen. When you click on that, you can see our team members that are listed here, and you can click on my name there, Dan Handford. This is more information about me. So I'm actually located here in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm married, have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and also a standard poodle named Bella. So we've had her for going on 5 years now, and a beautiful dog. Also got a beautiful family, and really excited. And all my children are under 10 years old right now. So I got a 9-year-old, 8-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old. So definitely life is busy in the Handford household, but I definitely have a really good supportive wife that helps out with a lot of those things. And we try to be a team together. So she helps a lot with some of my real estate stuff and my other business ventures that I have, and we have a good balance there. But there's a video here that talks a little bit more about my background. So if I don't have to take up each webinar to be able to do that, so you can go there and do it. And for those of you who are interested in joining us on one of our next investment opportunities, you can go to the website in the top right-hand corner. You can see this button here. It says Join the Passive Investing Club. When you click on that button, you'll see that there's a form that'll come up, and you can fill this form out, and it'll allow you to be able to jump on a phone call with us, and we'll discuss your investment goals to see if you're the right fit for us. Now, one thing that we do have this week that I don't normally mention is we actually have one of our latest offerings that is available. It's actually a 506 Charlie, and we're going to get into that in the webinar today as to what that actually means. One of the nice things about it is that it allows us to be able to talk about it publicly. So it's a kind of a public offering. We are only able to accept accredited investors in that offering. But on the website, you can click on this button here that says Current Offering. And when you do, it'll bring you to this website right here. This website will give you more information and details about the actual offering that we have available, and also some of the projected returns. And then if you're interested in finding out more information and seeing the actual offering memorandum or anything like that, you can actually fill out your name, email, and phone number here, and our system will automatically email you that information for those who are accredited. So I'm going to go ahead and type into the chat box here if you want. For those of you who are interested, you can just click that link to get a direct link to that offering if you'd like to take out some more information with it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this 506B and 506C security rules. Let's see. What I see is that only the panelists can see the chat. Yes, that's correct, Lorelei. Right now, I just have the chats available for me, because sometimes in the past we've had some people chatting and they're like spamming the group and stuff like that. So we've kind of disabled that for now. But any questions you guys have, feel free to type into the chat box or the Q&A box. I try to be available to answer some of those questions for you as much as I can. One of the things that you'll notice on my video today is that I think this side of my face is all kind of grayed out, and normally I have this really nice bright light coming in, but the window over here is kind of dark because it got the hurricane coming through, right? And so we get this nice, we usually just get a bunch of rain, maybe a little bit of wind, but I'll turn my camera a little bit and you can just kind of see outside there. It's a little bit, a little bit dingy out there. So it's not usually the nice bright sun that's coming through. So that's probably why I have that little shadow there. We did actually close on our new video recording studio. I think I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. And so over the next couple of weeks, or maybe in the next month or two, we're going to be hopefully going into a new studio and actually having a little bit better equipment to be able to do some of the stuff that we're doing on these weekly webinars, and continue to improve the quality of everything for you as our audience. So I actually have a specialized, for this particular topic, I have a special PDF that I actually put together. I'm not planning on emailing this PDF out, but I'm going to show it to you on the screen. And for those of you who want to take out your camera and take a snapshot of it, you can certainly do that if you wish. If you wish to do that, we're gonna dive deep into mostly Regulation D. We're not going to get into Regulation A for these securities exemptions, but this chart does have details and information on it from the Regulation A as well. So I won't go into details on that, but you can have that information on there as you're taking a picture, as you're taking a screenshot of this. So let me share my screen here differently for you so you guys can see this and you can follow along. And we'll go through each one of these different items as it relates to 506B and C. and then we'll open up for some questions at the end. All right, so now on your screen, if you want to just raise your hand, let me know that you can actually see this securities offering table by regulation. So if you'd like, you can take out your cell phone right now, take a screenshot, or if you just press the print screen button on your desktop, if you're watching it on your desktop, you can easily do that and just copy and paste it into a Word document. You can certainly do that as well. So somebody is saying, can you make it bigger? I will zoom into it a little bit as we're getting close, as we're going over some of this stuff. And I'll also try to, walk you through each one of these as well. So I'll try to zoom in just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. All right, let me find my annotation little doohickey, if you will. It's a little spotlight button. So you should be able to see my little green button, my little red button here on the screen. So that should be working really well for you there. And just going to lower everybody's hands here as I'm asking some questions. All right, so let me actually do this. So I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit. It's probably a little bit too much. Let's say 175 and see if that's enough. That should actually be enough. So we're going to go over this, and we're going to focus, since we're only focusing on Regulation D, I'm just going to kind of zoom in enough so we can see Regulation D, 506B and C. Hopefully you guys were able to take a picture of the whole thing. If not, you can at least take a picture of this, which is the zoomed in version of it. And we're going to go through each one of these. So I kind of call them 506 Bravo since the 506B. And the reason why I do that is because it's easier to differentiate that when you're talking about it over the phone or on a webinar, because sometimes B can sound like C and then C can sound like B. So I say 506 Bravo or 506 Charlie. So it makes it a little bit easier to enunciate or differentiate between the two. So let's first go through this first question here. You can see this first question here is, what is the dollar limit on the raise amount? And the dollar limit is actually unlimited on both 506B as well as 506C. So I've heard some people say, oh, the reason why you do a 506C is because you can raise more money, and really the 506B is limited to $5 million. It's not true. So you can actually raise as much as you want on either a 506 Bravo or a 506 Charlie. Now, one of the things I'll also mention to you on this webinar, as I usually mention on a lot of these webinars, is that I'm not a securities attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. This is my interpretation of what I have read and my interactions with some of the attorneys that we have that surround us. And so this is a chart that I've actually had some of them review, and it is this particular webinar is for educational purposes. So even though you learn a lot of this stuff on this webinar, you also, whenever you do an offering, you want to make sure you have a good securities attorney that's supporting you and backing you and can give you some additional advice on top of all of this. So don't take this information as a replacement for a legal advice. This is just educational information. So this second one here is there a limit on the dollar amount for investment size per investor? And no, there's not on either 506B, 506 Charlie, or 506 Bravo. And the reason there might be limits, because some offerings you might see, I heard that there's like a $5 million limit on this particular investment offering, but usually those limits on the investment size is not limited by, it is not limited by a securities rule, right? It is usually limited by the lender. The lender will sometimes say you cannot invest any more than X on an offering, because then you will own more than 20%, and then that person will be underwritten with the loan. And even those upper limits don't really prevent them from investing that amount, but if they want to invest over that limit, then they'll have to be underwritten with the loan. So usually most people will keep their investors under those limits to prevent that type of a trigger happening. Now, are you allowed to use general solicitation or advertising? Well, in a 506 Bravo, you are not. It is considered a private offering. And those private offerings are not allowed to be discussed in any type of public forum, meaning you can't put a post on Facebook and tell people you're looking for investors for a deal. You can't put a post on Instagram or LinkedIn or send out a mass blast email out to everybody. And so that is one of the limitations of the 506 Bravo. Now, I will say the nice thing about the 506 Charlie is that you are able to advertise and market it. There's certain disclaimers and things like that your attorney will have you put on there and things like that. But it's one that allows you to advertise and market for new investors. And you're going to see as we go throughout some of the things that changed, and it's because of that reason that you can actually market them as well. Now, we're going to be getting into the topic of accredited investors, and I see somebody on here has a question. How much does it cost to get certified as accredited from a third party? So most offerings will pay for that for you. So for example, I just mentioned earlier on this webinar that we have that new deal that we're actually doing right now called Braxton Carey Weston. It's an offering that's available to accredited investors only. And as you can see on here, that we are actually required to do a third-party accreditation verification in order to accept those investors. And there's actually a website called verifyinvestor.com, and most operators will use a service like that, and they will pay for it. So usually it's anywhere between about $50 to $75 per investor to have that done. And so that way, the way that service will work is, in our situation, we would actually send, upload that investor's information into the verifyinvestor.com database. They would send them an email and then give them instructions on what documents they need to be able to do their verification. Their attorney will review things, verify that they're accredited, and then send us back a certified letter stating that they are an accredited investor. And that letter is usually valid for 90 days past from the date that they've actually been certified or whatever, or been said that they're actually an accredited investor. Now, the third party option is not the only option. So third party is I always kind of say it's the safest, it's the easiest, it's the most compliant way to do it. But you can also do it yourself without a third party. So you could actually have each one of your investors send you their documents, and as long as you receive their documents and you can verify from those documents that they are accredited, then you've done your due diligence to make sure that they are accredited. But that puts a lot of extra burden on your team to actually be managing that piece of it. And so for us, we always use that third party. And it also is not that it's not that expensive for us to do that for the overall offering in the grand scheme of things. And so the actual offering itself will actually pay for those third-party verifications. Now, there's one other level that you could do for a third-party verification. If you don't want to go through a service like verifyinvestor.com, you can actually have your attorney or your attorney, like tax attorney, or your CPA, your financial advisor, somebody who's a licensed professional that knows your financial status. They can actually send in a letter stating that you are accredited. And we actually have some templated letters and things like that we're provided by our attorneys that we can send to these CPAs to have them fill it out and sign off on it. And that's kind of what I did for my situation, because I have a kind of a complex taxes that I have to file every year. So to send in all those documents would just be too burdensome. And so when I wanted to do an investment in a 506 Charlie, I'll call up my CPA and say, hey, could you send me an accreditation verification letter? And he's got a template that he just spits out, and he can sign off on and say, I'm an accredited investor, right? And so if you have a relationship with your CPA like that, it can be very, very beneficial. Now, let's get back to this next thing here about the advertising. One thing I wanted to mention about the advertising is that even though you have the ability to advertise with a 506 Charlie, most people don't actually start there. And it's usually because it's going to be very hard for you to find, especially as a newer syndicator. If you're just getting started, it's going to be very hard to have the ability to advertise and bring people in that don't know who you are. You have no track record. You have nothing to kind of prove that you're actually good enough, right? And that what's going to happen is you're going to spend a lot of money on advertising and not really get a lot of big results for it. And it's because you don't have a big presence. So that's one of the important reasons why it's good to create an authority platform when you're starting out, because you can now start to create this list and start to create an audience and a following, and people know who you are and they're talking about you in the space, right? And that will allow you to also have that kind of built-in audience. Our group actually didn't start doing these 506 Charlies until just recently, because we mostly were doing 506 Bravos, mostly because we had a lot of investors in our database already that we had prior existing relationships with, which is what we're going to talk about next. And it allowed us to be able to raise the funds that we needed for our offerings without having to be able to go out there and advertise. And we also were allowed to take on some non-accredited investors, which we'll get to that in just a moment as well, and not have to do a third-party accreditation verification with our accredited investors. But now we've grown to the point where we have over 30,000 members that are part of the Multifamily Investor Nation. We got a large following on the Meetup platform, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube, and our podcasts, and all over the place. And so it is now a great opportunity, but it took us a while to get to this point, right? Most offerings, I'd probably say 90% of the offerings that are out there are going to be a 506 Bravo, and you're going to see some of the reasons why that is here in just a moment. So the next thing here is does it require a prior existing relationship with the investor for them to be able to invest with you? Well, a 506 Bravo does. So you're required to have that prior existing relationship with that investor. And the 506 Charlie, you're not. Now, if you think about this thing, the 506 Bravos, you can't advertise, but you do have to have a prior existing relationship, and you don't have to verify that the accredited status of your investors. So that means that the SEC is saying you obviously have a prior existing relationship with them. You're not publicly advertising this. This is a private offering, and you're not going to be advertising it at all. You're only bringing on people that you have a prior existing relationship with you, and so we're going to let you not have to do a third-party accreditation verification. You can self-certify. And if you look at the other side of things, you basically on a 506 Charlie are possibly bringing in people that you don't know because you're advertising. You have no prior existing relationship with them. So they're like, well, then you have to verify, right? You got to verify because you don't know anything about some of these investors. Even though there might be some investors that have invested with you on multiple projects like we have, we still have to do that for everybody because we want to be able to market and advertise this and bring on investors that are not actually part of the offering. The next question in here is how many accredited investors are allowed? So as far as accredited investors, you can have an unlimited number of accredited investors on both a Bravo or a Charlie. It does not matter. Now, where the limitation comes in is down here a little ways where it says, if non-accredited investors are allowed, is there a limit? And so on a 506 Bravo, we are allowed to bring on non-accredited investors. However, they do have to be sophisticated, which means that they have to have the financial knowledge and wherewithal and the expertise and background to be able to make sound decisions about the investments that they're getting ready to get themselves into. And so we can only accept up to 35 of those investors in each one of these offerings. Now, on the 506 Charlie, you can't bring on non-accredited investors no matter what their sophisticated status is. They have to be accredited investors in order for you to bring them onto your level. So let's see here. How many accredited investors are allowed? Do the accredited investors need to be verified? So we talked about this already a little bit. The 506 Bravos are self-certified. They're filling out their private placement memorandum documents with the operating agreement, the operating agreement, the subscription agreement. They are self-certifying that they are accredited or that they are a non-accredited but sophisticated investor. And on the 506 Charlie, usually you're going to use some form of a third-party verification for that. Are non-accredited investors allowed? Again, we kind of talked about this already. Sophisticated investors, yes, on a Bravo, not allowed at all on a Charlie. Now, let's talk about some filing requirements. And there's a couple of questions already coming in, so we can talk about some of these questions pretty straightforward on here. The SEC filing requirement. So both the Regulation B and the Regulation 506 Bravo and 506 Charlie do require you to fill out what is called a Form D. And not a lot of people know about this, but those Form Ds can actually be verified and searched on the website for the SEC. And so if you type into the Google and you type in the Edgar, EDGAR, the Edgar SEC database, you can actually go in there and type in an offering name, and it'll show up in that list once the deal is closed. Because once the deal closes, they're required by the SEC to file that within, I think, 14 or 15 days. So you will be able to go in there and verify they're actually filing those documents properly, and it'll give you some details about that offering as well. Now, the state filing requirements vary state by state. So every state is just a little bit different on how they actually do things. And this is where these blue sky filing fees can get pretty expensive on an offering. It can usually be between about $5,000 to $10,000 on top of your legal fees for creating the syndication, depending on where your investors are. If all of your investors are in one state or pretty close to you, it's not a big deal. But when you're doing a pretty large offering and you have like 20 to 25 states that you're having to file these blue sky laws inside of, then it can get quite expensive. There's some of the most costly states is going to be like New York and California, where they can be, upwards of $2,000 to be able to register in those states. Now, it's not $2,000 per investor. It's usually for each filing, but every state you have to have a separate filing in each one of those states, because what you're doing is the federal filing is going through the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission, but each state has their own state Securities and Exchange Commission as well. So there is, and then now as far as the ongoing reporting requirements, neither one of them are required to have ongoing reporting. So now when you start to scroll over here into what's called the Regulation A, which you have two different tiers, Tier 1 and Tier 2, you do not have to file on a tier 1 registration, but on a tier 2 registration, you do. We're obviously not talking about that right now, but that's why that ongoing reporting requirement is in here, is because there are some of these regulations that do require ongoing reporting. It's just that in these ones, they do not have to be. Okay. All right. So let me open it up for some questions. I know you guys had a couple of questions in here, so I will open it up so you guys can I can go ahead and take a stab at some of your questions. Most of these probably shouldn't be too crazy, but definitely want to answer some of these questions as best I can. All right. What is the name of the third party for verification? So let me go ahead and I'll just type this into the database here. Let me actually see if I can. It's actually verifyinvestor.com. So it's actually pretty straightforward. Let me get rid of my verifyinvestor.com. So you can see here, let me switch my screens here so you can actually see this, but this is the website here. It's just called verifyinvestor.com. So you just go to verifyinvestor.com. I'll type it into the chat box for you so you can see that, and then you can do that. Somebody else was asking here about the Edgar database. So I'll just type this in here as well. So you can see on my screen here, this is the Edgar Bet database, and this I'll type in the screen, the little link there for you as well. But I just typed into Google EDGAR, Edgar, SEC, and it came up. So it was the first link. You can actually see that here. It was the first link that showed up. Edgar SEC, first link that showed up there is the company search page. You can easily do that as well. So let's see. Let's go back to this list and then open it up for some more questions. Answered that live. What constitutes a prior existing relationship? So Justin, this is a very common question that is posed, and I think every attorney might give you just a little bit different. Might give you just a little bit different of a definition, and the SEC is not very clear on this either. They've issued some clarifications through some documents and things like that, but they want to see that you have a prior existing relationship. The key point here is prior and then existing. So before you actually sign the contract on a deal, you need to already have had that relationship built with that investor. Anybody that you build a new relationship with after that offering, you really should not be bringing that person on. Okay. Now the existing is obviously it has to be prior to and it's an existing relationship. Now, usually it has to be a substantial, like a substantive relationship, meaning that you can't just have like met them one time, put them in your database, and now you have a prior existing relationship. It's usually an ongoing process where they want to probably see. The reason why I say probably is because they know that they have definitely come out and said they want to see more than one touch point, but they have not said is 3 the magic number, is 7 the magic number. There's not really kind of a rule or a magic number like that. But typically what you want to try to do is try to have multiple touch points with them with different types of opportunity, with types of media. So we try to have multiple phone calls with our investors, multiple touch points via email. We mail them things. I text them, things like that are just multiple touch points over a period of time. So there's not like you have to have known them for 30 days, or you have to have had dinner with them and their family and know everything about them. There's nothing like a hard and fast rule for that. Are there any income or net worth requirements for sophisticated investors? So for the non-accredited sophisticated investor, no, but for the accredited investor, there is. So the general kind of way to remember about the accredited investor is that an accredited investor has to have one of two things. So it has to meet either an income or a net worth requirement. The income requirement is they have to have at least $200,000 if they're single, or $300,000 if they're married, of income for the last 2 years, and they have a reasonable expectation for that to continue. And the net worth requirement is that they have to have at least $1 million of net worth, not including their primary residence. Now, the SEC has recently, at the end of August, set out some additional opportunities for investors that are normally non-accredited that is actually been expanded to include additional people for the accredited investor, terms, or that definition for an accredited investor. And here's actually a link that somebody is typing in right now. That is actually from August 30th. I'm not verifying this website or anything like that, but it looks like it is giving some information about this ruling. So I will copy and paste this to everybody if you want to take a look at this. It expands the definition for accredited investor, but it's actually mostly going to be for it's mostly going to be for people who are working for other people that are in an investment offering, or if they've taken certain, securities laws exams and things like that, they can certainly qualify for that. But you can find out more information by looking at that article, or and here's actually the article here on your screen. You can look at that article, or maybe Google SEC, accredited investor definition expansion or something like that, and it will go through that. But as far as the income and net worth requirements for sophisticated investors that are non-accredited, no, there is not. Regarding accredited status, if you are married, can you choose to use your individual income to meet the $200K per year requirement, or do you have to include your spouse's income and meet the $300,000 a year requirement? This could be significant if your spouse doesn't have any income. So the requirement is pretty clear that if you are married, it doesn't matter if your spouse is working or not. It is $300,000 per year. That's my understanding with that. There may be some differences if you are not filing jointly, like if you file separately, there might be some differences there, but most people who are married file jointly. And I do believe that does include that. It would require you to have that $300,000. So I've actually had some investors ask me that recently, especially on this most recent deal too. Let's see. So if you and a partner are general partners on a deal, do both partners have to have a substantive relationship with that investor, or just one of the GPs have to have that relationship? So one of the GPs have to have that significant relationship with them, that prior substantive relationship with them. It does not have to be all of the GPs have a relationship with them. So it just has to be one of those GPs that are on the project. Explain a little more about the blue sky filing. So the blue sky filing, Cedric, is each state has their own securities. They always have their own state level Securities and Exchange Commission. And those blue sky filings are basically filing with those states saying, hey, we took investments and we from investors that are located in your state. And you have to file in that state and tell them how many of those investors it was, how much of money you actually took from those investors to put into your investment offering, and a couple other different items on those different forms that you have as well. It's nothing that you as the operator really have to worry about, because you just have your attorney handle that. So you just have your attorney you send them the list of your investors. They don't have to have names or anything like that, but they have to have the states and where they're located, and all that stuff, all that information gets sent in on those forms that they send it out as well. Let's see. Do these exemptions, I'm gonna go up a little bit. I can't find the files. Let's see. I'm not actually sure. Let me actually see this. So somebody was asking, so these actual company names in here, I think Tom was asking about this. You don't type in here the name of like an operator. So like you wouldn't go in here and type in passiveinvesting.com, which is the name of our group. You would actually type in the name of the entity that was created to acquire that offering. So most of the time it's going to be like, for example, if you're trying to buy Heritage Apartments, right? You might have the offering name might actually, the LLC that's created might be Heritage 123 Apartments LLC. And so that's the actual thing that you could put in there. Now, one thing that you could usually put in there is you can put the main operator's name. So if you know some of the main operators, you can usually put their names in there as well, and it'll actually show up their names in there. But most reputable companies will be putting that information into that database, so it can actually go in there. So you can usually type in their last name, and they will show up. Maybe I'm hoping it does that, but if not, you just have to know that, you have to know the name of that entity so that you can actually figure out how it is. I just typed in a couple of the ones that I'm in, and they're actually on there as well. So I'm not publicly sharing that information, obviously, because that's why I have my screen paused, but you can definitely do that yourself if you choose to do that. All right, let me go back to this screen here and look at some more of these questions. Oh, what factors do you feel is sufficient in determining if a potential sophisticated investor is knowledgeable enough to be involved? Is your detailed offering memorandum general enough? Is your detailed offering general enough? I don't understand the whole, is your detailed offering memorandum general enough? But the potential sophisticated investor knowledgeable is that you just have to be able to understand from them, like if they're starting to ask you a bunch of questions and you have to define a bunch of stuff, and when you're on that initial call with them, the likelihood of them being sophisticated is not very great. But if you talk to them and I always ask them to give me their background, right? So I want to know what's their background in real estate. So they told me that they've bought a lot of single family homes and they know a lot about the different, return metrics and things like that. Then they're likely going to be sophisticated. And at the end of the day, they're going to be signing a document stating that they actually are sophisticated and they understand the risks and the merits of the investment that they're getting in as well. Do these exemptions differ in terms of whether or not you can allow your investors to sell their position to someone else? So the answer to that question is yes. So if you have an investor, usually within an SEC, the SEC will limit you and have a lockout period of 12 months on these offerings, where before you can actually sell your shares to somebody else. And so those, because it is an illiquid security and it's an exempt offering, there's usually a 12-month lockout. But if you wanted to sell your shares to somebody else, then they would still have to meet these same requirements based on the original operating agreement that was put into place. They have to agree to those as well. When or why would you use a Regulation A? I'm not really going to get into that, Irish Kevin, but there are a couple of nuances. Most people don't use a Regulation A with these types of offerings. It's usually used in a fund format because it takes about 6 to 9 months usually to get those funds set up, and it costs usually $75,000 to $100,000 of legal fees and filings and things like that to be able to get those set up. And so most people, because of the cost as well as the time involved, they usually don't use a Regulation A, even though it has a lot more flexibilities when it comes to bringing on some investors that are not necessarily accredited or even sophisticated. Let's see. So somebody was saying on here, I looked up your offering in North Carolina and it's not there either. Can you show us one of your past projects? So because most of ours are private offerings, I cannot show you that information. And the one that we're doing right now is actually not been filed yet because we haven't closed on it. So like I said earlier, those forms are only filed after you close on the property. So we'll be closed on this property in the first week of November. And so usually within 15, you have like a 14 or 15 day period of time where those Form Ds have to be filed after you close on a property. And so after that, it will actually show up in there as far as any of our offerings. What determines where you file for state fees? Is it the property or the state of the LLC formation? Well, there's several different fees. Obviously, when you create an LLC in a state, they're going to charge you to create the LLC in that state. But the blue sky filing fees are not based on where the formation of that LLC is. It's based on where the investor is. So if the investor is an entity, then wherever that entity is formed, that's the state in which you have to file those blue sky filings. If it's an individual, then you have to have where is that individual located? Where do they reside as their primary residence? And you have to file in that state for those blue sky laws. Let's see. On average of 100 investors, how many will invest in on a capital raise? I would probably say most closely to about maybe 5 to 10%. If you're really good, 15%. But if you have 100 investors, probably about 10 of them, I would guess, would actually invest with you, as long as they are curated properly. If you just put a bunch of people on your list and they're not really qualified to be on your list, then the chances of them being 10% is not that great. Maybe one if you're lucky, if it's not curated very well. Do I understand you correctly? A prior existing relationship needs to be established before the offering. Yes, that is correct, but that is only a 506 Bravo. So it's only a 506 Bravo and a 506 Charlie. It does not have to have a prior existing relationship, and so you can do that before. Or is it okay to progress that relationship before signing? No. So it has to be before the actual offering has been released. Most attorneys will agree with me on that I have talked to, because that's a question that we have gotten as well. What are the standard legal fees range for the Regulation D? It can be around the gamut of $8,000 upwards to $15,000, $20,000 depending on your attorney, and that does not usually include the blue sky filing fees. So that's on top. The blue sky filing fees will be on top of whatever those additional legal fees are. Let's see. I answered that one. When might verifyinvestor.com or other third-party verifiers take into account the newer SEC expansion of the AI definition any of the accredited investor definition? Any idea? So the ruling, Pete, is that within these accredited investor expansion definitions will go into effect 60 days from the time they were announced or released. So that's actually going to be the end of October. So once that goes through, then they will accept those into it. And so I've actually had investors already ask me that, hey, I actually am a non-accredited investor based on the old definition, but based on the new definition, I'm an accredited investor. So as long as your investment offering is closing after it goes into effect, then you are fine because they will be accredited by the time you close on that property. But if you are closing before that 60-day period of time, then then those expanded definitions do not apply to you, and you cannot accept them based on those definitions. Let's see. So someone's asking, can we get a recording of this webinar? Yes, though we will release a recording of this webinar after the webinar. Usually it's, that afternoon or the next morning or something like that. We'll send those out to you, and we'll also post it on our YouTube channel as well. Let's see. So Colm is asking a question. We did a two-tiered investment structure similar to your wonderful 288 unit one in North Carolina. Really beautiful, by the way. Our offering was a 20% Class A. If yours is 30% Class A, I would be curious to hear why you thought 30% was the right amount for the 30% Class A. Class B and their offering flew off the shelf compared to their Class A. So I would say that it depends. It depends on the offering. So there's never an offering that we do that's like, oh, we always have to do 20%. I mean, we did an offering even before that was at 20.9%, right? We did one prior to that was like 34%. So it's really based and it's uniquely situated for that particular offering and where we want to put the return metrics for Class B. So if it's a very heavily cash flowing deal, we can take some of those cash flows from Class B to be able to give more shares for Class A, and that actually increases the overall return for Class B. So it's kind of a balancing act. There's never really a rule of thumb of only 20%. I like to see it anywhere between 20 to 30, maybe 35%. 40% would be my max that I would like to see inside of a Class A offering for the two-tiered investment structure. And some of you are probably wondering, what is he talking about? All that stuff is over my head. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We did a video on this a couple of weeks ago on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel and figure out and figure out these two-tiered investment structures and things like that we did. And I will say that the Class B usually fills up faster, but we have a large number of our investors that really like that Class A investment structure. And so one of our investment offerings filled up within 3.5 days. I mean, both Class A and Class B, and it was oversubscribed by 1.5 million. And so we had some issues trying to fill up some of those spots. And so we have plenty of that on this offering coming up. And some of the investors really like that Class A. And we've been doing a lot of things to educate our investors as to where they sit in the capital stack and where they really want to try to diversify their portfolio. And we also offer them to have a blended option. And so a lot of our investors will choose to do that blended option as well. Is there a limit to how many IRA investors you can take into a deal? No, there is not. Good question there. Can you send the link of that prior recording of tier Class A and Class B investors? Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'll open up my YouTube channel here and let's see if I can turn my video off here. And I believe I'm going to say equity. I'm going to have the word equity in here. Equity waterfall structures. I think that was the one that we did. Here's actually capital stack structures as well. So there's actually 2 of them. So let me do this. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to click on this and open it up. This is one that's a good video for you to watch. And it's good for you just to subscribe to the channel because a lot of these videos that come in there. Here's a video here, Anant, on explaining capital stack structures and apartment syndication. And we went through different capital stack structures like you can see here on the screen, whether it be a 2-tier or a single tier, things like that. And so you can easily go through that. The other one was, I think that was the only one we did on the capital stacks. And we did another one here, which is explaining the waterfall structures, which is another explanation. We kind of did a full, I did a little whiteboard drawing on this one so you can actually see exactly what that one was. So let me copy this one into the chat box here. And those are the 2 that I would suggest that you go after and review. All right, Class A, thanks, no problem at all. And let's see. The 2 tiers, I'll look up on YouTube, is 7 and 9% investment. Please repeat the attorney fee and filing fee. So the attorney fee is usually between about $8,000 to $20,000, depending on your attorney. And then the filing fees are going to usually range between about usually $5,000 to $8,000, sometimes $10,000, depending on how many states you have. So if you have a smaller number of states where your investors are located, then it'll be a smaller fee. If you have a lot of states, then you have to file in a lot more states, and those fees can actually get up even more. You're asking me a lot of questions, and that's great. I love those questions. You can also, when you fill out that form on our landing page for the investment offering that we have available right now, shoot my assistant an email or shoot me an email. I'll jump on a phone call with you to answer some of your questions, because I know you have some really good questions here in regards to that offering. So I don't want to take a lot of the time on the webinar today to be able to answer some of those, but we can certainly have a one-on-one phone call, but we'll be glad to answer some of those questions for you. So looks like that is all the questions that we have in for right now. So glad to be able to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much for your questions, because they help us be able to fill in some of the gaps of some of the content that we're providing. So you can certainly do that as much as you want. And I'm going to refresh the screen here. Looks like we have another one scheduled for next week. So our little ticker is not updated just yet. She's probably still working on that. But on Tuesday next week, September 22nd, we're at 12 p.m. Eastern. We've moved it to Tuesday next week. We're going to be talking about what is a Class A, B, C, and D asset, and how do you define these different asset classes. So make sure you join us for that. And for those of you who are joining us live, I'm going to actually type in an easy link for you to click on to be able to register for that. You can actually go to this link here, which is just multifamilyinvestornation.com/MFIN webinar. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And if you have any thoughts or ideas on some new topics or anything like that, you can feel free to let me know. And look forward to continue to share some additional content with you and providing some of these webinars ongoing. And looking forward to seeing you next week on Tuesday as we break down the asset classes for apartment syndication.